Chapter 1. Finger Paints. I lay beneath the quilts in the midnight bedroom, squeezing the pillow against my ears. I pressed the pillow harder and harder still, but with no relief. Like razor blades, the hate-filled voices kept piercing the layers of cotton and feathers, slicing into my brain. Beyond the bedroom door, past the living room and into the kitchen, my parents' screams scolded me from the farthest corner of my grandparents' apartment. Tears flowed into the pillowcase, wet and hot against my cheeks. I felt an invisible cord tightening around my throat, and I struggled not to sob. Quiet. I've got to be quiet. I can't let them hear me. They can't know I'm not sleeping. I took in a deep breath, held it as long as I could, and let it out slowly. I inhaled again, and gradually the cord began to loosen. Opening my eyes, I looked over at my little brother, Brucey, sleeping peacefully in his crib. A nightlight projected long shadows from the crib's rails, fanning out across faded yellow walls. I studied the plaster cracks on the ceiling, like black threads of lightning across a crumbling sky. The muffled thunder of my father's voice raged again, and I heard my mother crying, "Oh, Mommy, I want to help you. It's my job to help you. But I'm so scared." Turning back to the ceiling, I tried to concentrate on the cracks, but it was no use. I couldn't blot out my mother's crying. So I closed my eyes, trying in vain to fall asleep as my parents' voices kept shattering the stillness. Once again, I pressed the pillow against my ears, but the result was no different than before. I couldn't stop the sounds from coming through the walls. It seemed like hours before a heavy silence fell over the apartment. Unable to sleep, I rose from bed, tiptoed down the hallway, and slipped on my shoes and coat. Leaving the front door ajar, I made my way down 3 flights of unlit stairs and stepped out onto Daly Avenue. Cold rain pelted my forehead as I watched a group of bearded men in black coats scurrying across the sidewalks and disappearing inside their little synagogue. Reb Moshe's wagon passed in front of me, piled high with hats, old coats, and rags. The clippity-clop of his old mare's hooves echoed loudly on the cobblestones. I followed behind the wagon, and when it turned the corner onto 180th Street, I could see that the marketplace was teeming with people. A farmer sprinted by with wire cages under his arms, alive with cackling hens. Vendors hauled push carts overflowing with potatoes, carrots, beets, and turnips. Shlomo the Toothless, our local fishmonger, spread fillets of salmon on beds of ice with his young son Menachem. Shmulek the butcher stood cranking an iron rod, unfurling his tattered green awning in an attempt to protect the slabs of kosher meat from the driving rain. As I struggled between the bustling bodies, memories of my mother's cries poured into my brain, and the corners of my mouth began to sag. Now my chest was heaving. I pushed past them and began running along the slippery sidewalks of Vise Avenue. I don't know how far or how long I ran, but the next thing I knew I was slipping through the door, creeping into the apartment. I pulled off my soggy shoes, hung my coat in the hall closet, and tiptoed into the kitchen. Lifting a set of finger paints, a tray of cupcake tins, and a stack of paper from the art shelf, I sat at the table and poured paint into the tins, spreading the paper across the tabletop. Within seconds, my hands were wet with color. First, I smeared the page with crimson. Then, I pushed a streak of orange across the red. Next came yellow, brown, and then purple. My fingers bolted back and forth across fiery oceans of color. Dipping my left hand into the darkest pan, I scraped it across the page. Black paint sprayed from my fingertips, splattering against the kitchen wall. "We'll have none of that," my mother's voice sounded from behind me, and I froze. Squeezing a rag in the sink, she quickly wiped the